The stars bent and twisted as the horizon's edge tore through space at speeds that would have seemed impossible just 5 years ago. Captain Dae-hyun gripped the arms of his command chair as the ship shuddered violently. Behind him, the spatial anomaly they had barely escaped still pulsed with dangerous energy, its gravity well threatening to pull them back into oblivion. "Status report," Dae-hyun called out, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We're clear of the anomaly, Captain," his navigation officer responded, "but we've crossed into uncharted territory. The star patterns don't match anything in our database." Dae-hyun nodded slowly. This was humanity's 5th year with faster-than-light travel, and they were still learning that the galaxy was far larger and stranger than anyone had imagined. He was about to order a full sensor sweep when the communications officer sat up straight in her seat. "Captain, we're being hailed. The signal is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's not aggressive, but it's definitely advanced." "On screen," Dae-hyun ordered. The view screen flickered to life, and Dae-hyun found himself looking at a face that was both alien and oddly gentle. The being had large luminous eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. Its skin had a faint pearlescent quality, shifting between soft blues and silvers. When it spoke, the translator worked flawlessly, rendering the words in perfect Korean. "Unknown vessel, you have entered Volani space. We mean you no harm. We are Elder Mirai of the Volani Concordance. Your ship appears damaged. Do you require assistance?" The bridge crew exchanged glances. In humanity's short history of space exploration, they had encountered only ruins and long-dead civilizations. This was first contact with a living alien species, and it was happening because they had gotten lost running from a cosmic hazard. Dae-hyun cleared his throat. "Elder Mirai, I am Captain Dae-hyun of Earth's exploration vessel Horizon's Edge. We fled a spatial anomaly and crossed into your territory unintentionally. We apologize for the intrusion." Elder Mirai's expression softened even further. "There is no need for apology, Captain. The anomaly you encountered is known to us as the Whispering Tear. Many ships have been lost to its pull. That you escaped speaks well of your skill. Please allow us to guide you to our nearest station. Your ship needs repairs and we have much to discuss." 2 days later, Dae-hyun stood in the docking bay of a Volani station that looked more like a work of art than a space facility. Everything curved in gentle arcs, and soft light seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. No harsh angles, no visible weapons, no military presence at all. It was beautiful and completely foreign to his military training. Ambassador Hana had arrived on a fast shuttle from Earth as soon as news of first contact reached home. She stood beside Dae-hyun now, equally amazed by what she was seeing. A Volani delegation approached them, led by Elder Mirai herself. "Welcome to Haven Station," Mirai said, her voice carrying a musical quality. "We are honored to meet humanity for the first time." Over the next several hours, Hana and Dae-hyun learned things that challenged everything they thought they knew about civilization. The Volani had achieved faster-than-light travel over 12,000 years ago. They had technology that could manipulate matter at the atomic level, healing devices that could cure any injury, and energy sources that seemed limitless. Yet in all those thousands of years, they had never once built a weapon of war. "How is that possible?" Dae-hyun asked during a private meeting. "In 12,000 years, you never faced a threat? Never encountered an enemy?" Elder Mirai exchanged glances with another Volani, a younger scholar named Taimin. "We have faced threats, Captain," she said quietly. "But we chose a different path. We call it the quiet path. When faced with aggression, we withdraw. When faced with conflict, we negotiate. When faced with violence, we endure. For 12,000 years, this philosophy has sustained us." Taimin leaned forward, his eyes bright with curiosity. "Captain, we have studied your ship's computer database with your permission. Your species has a different history. You have fought wars, many wars. You have built weapons of incredible destructive power. Yet here you are, reaching for the stars. How did you survive your own violence?" Dae-hyun felt the weight of human history pressing down on him. "We learned," he said simply. "We nearly destroyed ourselves several times, but each time we stepped back from the edge. We're not perfect. We still have conflicts, but we're trying to be better." Hana added, "Our violence taught us the value of peace. Our war showed us the cost of hatred. We carry our scars, but we also carry the lessons they taught us." The Volani listened with fascination. Over the following days, cultural exchange began in earnest. The Volani were amazed by human art, by the raw emotion in their music, by the passion in their literature. They found it curious that a species so capable of violence could create such beauty. Taemin spent hours with Daehyun, asking endless questions about human military history, tactics, and strategy. It disturbed some of the other Vellani, but Taemin was insatiable in his curiosity. "Why do you want to know about war?" Daehyun asked him one evening. Taemin was quiet for a long moment. "Because I wonder if the quiet path is truly complete," he finally said. "We have peace, yes. But is it peace or simply the absence of challenge? Your species fascinates me because you chose peace after knowing war. We chose peace because we never knew anything else." On the 7th day, Elder Mirai made an extraordinary offer. "Ambassador Hana, Captain Daehyun, I wish to invite humanity to the Galactic Assembly. It is a council of 47 peaceful species who have joined together in the pursuit of knowledge and harmony. Your species would enter as probationary members, but it would be a beginning." Hana's eyes went wide. "There are 47 other species out here?" 47 peaceful ones, Mirai corrected gently. "The galaxy is vast, Ambassador. Not all who dwell in it share our values, but those of us who seek the light find each other eventually." As the horizon's edge prepared to depart for Earth with this incredible news, Daehyun stood with Taemin one final time. The Vellani scholar looked troubled. "What's wrong?" Daehyun asked. "I have studied your history extensively now," Taemin said slowly, "and I have a question that troubles me. If a species that cannot defend itself meets a species that seeks only to destroy, what happens?" Daehyun met his eyes. "The peaceful species dies unless someone stands between them and the threat." Taemin nodded slowly. "That is what I feared you would say, and that is what troubles me most of all." The horizon's edge jumped to faster-than-light speed, carrying news that would change humanity's place in the cosmos forever. Behind them, the Vellani watched and wondered if meeting humanity was the beginning of something wonderful or the end of everything they had built over 12,000 years of peace. Neither species knew that the answer would be both. The ring of accord hung in space like a jeweled crown, massive beyond anything humanity had ever constructed. Ambassador Hana stared out the viewport of her shuttle as they approached, trying to comprehend the scale. The ring was large enough to contain entire cities, and according to the briefing materials, it housed representatives from all 47 member species of the Galactic Assembly. Captain Daehyun sat beside her, wearing his dress uniform. He had been asked to accompany her to provide what Elder Mirai called military perspective. Hana suspected it was actually because the Assembly wanted to see what kind of warriors humanity could produce. They would judge humans not just on words but on the bearing of their soldiers. "Nervous?" Daehyun asked quietly. "Terrified," Hana admitted. "We're about to meet dozens of species that have been spacefaring for thousands of years. We've had faster-than-light travel for 5 years. What if they see us as children playing with dangerous toys? Then we show them we're children who learn fast," Daehyun replied. The shuttle docked, and they were escorted into a vast chamber that took Hana's breath away. The ceiling arched impossibly high, and tiered seating rose in graceful curves around a central speaking platform. Beings of every imaginable form occupied those seats. Some were humanoid, others were definitely not. Hana saw species that seemed to be made of crystalline structures, others that floated in spheres of contained atmosphere, and still others that defied easy description. Elder Mirai met them at the entrance, her presence calm and reassuring. "Welcome, Ambassador, Captain. Today humanity speaks to the galaxy for the first time." The session began with formal introductions. Hana spoke carefully, explaining Earth's history without hiding the violent parts. She talked about the wars, the near extinctions, the slow climb toward global cooperation. The assembly listened in silence, their attention absolute. When she finished, the questions began. Most were curious and friendly, but some held an edge of concern. How could humanity guarantee they would not bring their violent ways into assembly space? What systems did they have to prevent warfare? Could a species born in conflict truly embrace peace? Hana answered each question honestly. "We cannot guarantee perfection," she said. "We can only promise that we have learned from our mistakes. Our violent past taught us the value of peace more powerfully than any philosophy could. We know the cost of war because we have paid it in blood and tears." One representative, a towering being from a species called the Kryn Dominion, spoke with barely concealed contempt. "The Assembly has maintained peace for thousands of years without the need for military might. Your presence here suggests you believe force has value. That belief itself is dangerous. Daehyun stood before Hana could respond. With respect, Representative, we do not celebrate violence. But we recognize that the universe is not always kind. Preparation is not the same as aggression. A locked door does not invite thieves. It simply acknowledges they exist. The Kryn representative's expression hardened, but Elder Mirai smoothly redirected the conversation. After hours of discussion, the assembly voted. Humanity would be granted probationary membership with significant restrictions. They could attend meetings and participate in cultural exchanges, but they could not vote on assembly matters for at least 5 years. They would be watched, judged, and evaluated. It was not everything Hana had hoped for, but it was a beginning. Over the following weeks, Hana and Daehyun remained at the Ring of Accord as humanity's representatives. Daehyun found an unlikely friend in Taemin, who had also come to the assembly as part of the Villani delegation. The young Villani scholar remained fascinated by human military history and tactics. They spent long evenings in one of the Ring's observation lounges, discussing everything from ancient Earth battles to theoretical combat scenarios. Taemin absorbed every word, his questions growing more sophisticated. "Why do you defend from high ground?" Taemin asked one evening. "Advantage of position," Daehyun explained. "You can see farther, force enemies to tire themselves climbing, and use gravity to increase weapon effectiveness. Basic tactical principle." "And why do you create supply lines rather than simply foraging?" "Because an army that steals from the land makes enemies of the people. An army that brings its own supplies can maintain discipline and keep the civilian population neutral or even friendly." Taemin processed this thoughtfully. "Your warfare has ethics built into it, rules about how to fight, even in the midst of violence. That is fascinating to me." Other Villani noticed these conversations and expressed concern to Elder Mirai. Why was Taemin so interested in violence? Why did he spend time with the human warrior learning about death and destruction? Mirai defended him, but Hana could see the worry in her eyes. Meanwhile, tensions grew in the assembly. The Kryn Dominion had been testing borders, sending scout ships into territories belonging to peaceful species. Each time, the assembly responded with diplomatic protests. Each time, the Kryn apologized and withdrew. But the incidents kept happening, growing bolder. During one assembly session, a representative from a small species called the Remner presented evidence of Kryn military buildup near their shared border. The Kryn representative dismissed it as defensive preparations, nothing more. Daehyun watched the exchange with growing unease. He had seen this pattern before in human history. One nation testing boundaries, gauging responses, looking for weakness. It was reconnaissance before invasion. He shared his concerns with Hana that evening. They're preparing for something. The Kryn aren't just exploring or defending, they're probing for weak points. "What should we do?" Hana asked. "Nothing we can do," Daehyun said grimly. "We're probationary members. If we raise alarms about a full member species, we'll be dismissed as warmongers seeing threats where none exist." He was right. When Hana carefully mentioned her concerns to Elder Mirai, the Villani leader listened but remained unconvinced. "The Kryn have been aggressive in rhetoric before," Mirai said. "But the assembly has always found diplomatic solutions. We must have faith in the process." Weeks passed. The Kryn incidents continued but remained small. Then came the distress call from Serenity's Haven, a small Villani colony near Kryn space. The transmission was fragmented, speaking of Kryn ships in orbit, of demands for surrender, of civilians in danger. The assembly called an emergency session. The Kryn representative looked uncomfortable, but insisted it was a misunderstanding, a communications error. Their ships were on a peaceful survey mission and had been misidentified. Then, allow an assembly inspection team to visit the colony, Elder Mirai suggested. The Kryn representative hesitated just a fraction too long. "Of course, we have nothing to hide, but it would take 3 days to arrange the inspection. 3 days of bureaucracy and diplomatic protocols." Daehyun watched the proceedings with mounting frustration. His military training screamed at him that 3 days might be too long. That night, he stood in the observation lounge with Taemin, staring out at the stars. In human history, when aggressors are given time, they use it to consolidate their gains. 3 days is an eternity in a hostage situation. Taemin was quiet for a long moment. "If this were a human situation, what would you do?" "I would send ships immediately. I would position forces to respond rapidly if negotiations failed. I would prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. And if diplomacy failed? If the Kryn truly had hostile intent? Daehyun met his eyes. Then I would get those civilians out, whatever it took. Taemin nodded slowly. I have been studying your military philosophy for months now, Captain. I understand the tactics, the strategies, the logic, but there is one thing I still do not fully understand. What's that? You speak of protecting the innocent as a sacred duty. You tell stories of soldiers who died saving strangers. Why? What makes a warrior willing to die for people they have never met? Daehyun considered the question carefully. Because if we don't stand between the innocent and harm, who will? Because letting evil happen when you have the power to stop it makes you part of that evil. Because some things are worth fighting for, and the lives of innocent people top that list. Taemin stared out at the stars for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I think I am beginning to understand why the galaxy's most peaceful species chose to stand with humanity. We did not choose you despite your capacity for violence. We chose you because you understand what that violence should be used to protect. 3 days later, the inspection team reported back. Serenity's haven had been abandoned. The Kryn ships were gone, and of the 3,000 Villani civilians who had lived there was no sign at all. The emergency broadcast came through every channel simultaneously. Jiwon's face filled the screen, her gentle features twisted with fear. Behind her, smoke rose from burning buildings and the sound of destruction echoed through the transmission. This is Jiwon, teacher at Serenity's haven, she said, her voice shaking. The Kryn Dominion has invaded our colony. They arrived without warning, demanding we surrender all our technology and submit to their authority. When our council asked to contact the assembly, they opened fire on our government buildings. They have taken thousands of us hostage. Please, someone help us. They are destroying everything we have built. They are destroying our history, our culture. Please. The transmission cut out. The assembly chamber erupted in shocked conversation. Elder Mirai stood with her hands trembling, her face pale. For 12,000 years, the Villani had known peace. Now their people were under attack, and she did not know what to do. The Kryn representative stood and spoke smoothly. This is clearly a radical faction acting without authorization from the Dominion. We condemn these actions and will send negotiators immediately to resolve this peacefully. Daehyun wanted to scream. He had heard these lies before, seen this playbook used throughout human history. Delay, deny, deflect. Buy time for the invasion to succeed while pretending to seek peace. Ambassador Hana stood. The assembly must send aid immediately. Those people need rescue, not negotiation. A representative from one of the older species shook their head. We do not send military aid. That is not the assembly way. We will pursue diplomatic channels. Violence only begets more violence. They are already experiencing violence. Hana's voice rose. Diplomatic channels failed 3 days ago when we waited instead of acted. Every hour we delay, more innocents suffer. But the assembly voted according to their ancient principles. They would send negotiators. They would pursue peace through dialogue. They would not authorize any military response because such things violated the core values of the assembly. The vote was overwhelming. Elder Mirai proposed a compromise, a rapid response team to evacuate civilians while negotiations continued. This too was voted down. It might be seen as aggressive. It might escalate the situation. Better to trust in diplomacy. Daehyun left the chamber before the session ended, unable to watch anymore. He found Taemin in the observation lounge, staring at a small display showing the last transmission from Jiwon. They are going to let them die, Taemin said quietly. The assembly is going to negotiate while 3,000 of my people suffer. They will talk for days, maybe weeks, and by the time they act, it will be too late. I know, Daehyun said. In your history, when something like this happened, what did humans do? Sometimes we failed them. Sometimes we arrived too late. But sometimes a few brave people decided that doing the right thing was more important than following the rules. Taemin turned to look at him. You are thinking of going after them. It was not a question. Daehyun nodded slowly. The Horizon's Edge is still docked here. My crew would volunteer, but it would end humanity's relationship with the assembly. They would see it as aggression, as humans bringing violence into their peaceful space. Everything Ambassador Hana has worked for would be destroyed. And if you do nothing, then I spend the rest of my life knowing I could have saved them and chose politics instead. Taemin was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood. I am coming with you. You can't. You're Villani. If you break the quiet path, If you participate in violence, your people will never forgive you. You will be an outcast. Then I will be an outcast who acted when action was needed, rather than a faithful follower who let innocents die because it was convenient. Taemin's voice was steady. Captain, you have taught me much about human military philosophy. Now let me show you something about the Villani. We may be peaceful, but we are not cowards. We have simply never had reason to test our courage. I think it is time. Within hours, Daehyun had assembled a volunteer crew. Every single member of the Horizon's Edge stepped forward. They knew the consequences. They knew they were ending their careers, possibly facing imprisonment when they returned. They did not care. Ambassador Hana found Daehyun in the docking bay as his crew prepared for departure. I should stop you, she said. This will destroy everything. I know. The assembly will expel humanity. Earth's government will be furious. You will probably face court-martial. I know that too. Hana's eyes filled with tears. Then why? Because someone has to stand between the innocent and harm. Because if humanity joins an assembly that lets civilians die rather than violate protocol, then we have learned nothing from our own history. Better to be expelled for doing right than welcomed for doing nothing. Hana pulled him into a brief embrace. Then go with my blessing, Captain. I will try to minimize the political damage, but I cannot promise anything. The Horizon's Edge departed without authorization, its faster-than-light jump signature leaving a clear trail. Within minutes, the assembly knew. Within an hour, formal protests were being filed. Within 2 hours, motions to expel humanity permanently were being drafted. None of it mattered to Daehyun and his crew. They were committed now. Serenity's haven appeared on their sensors after a 2-day journey. Kryn warships surrounded the colony, their weapons trained on the civilian population centers. The Horizon's Edge was outgunned and outnumbered. Under any tactical analysis, this was a suicide mission. They are hailing us, Captain, the communications officer reported. The Kryn commander wants to speak. Put him through. A Kryn officer appeared on screen, his expression one of amused contempt. A single human ship. Have you come to surrender on behalf of your pathetic species? I have come for the civilians, Daehyun said calmly. Release them and we will leave peacefully. The Kryn commander laughed. Or what, you will attack us? You are 1 ship against 5. You will die and the civilians will remain our prisoners. Go home, human. This does not concern you. It concerns anyone with a conscience. Daehyun cut the transmission and turned to his crew. Tactical, what are our options? Extremely limited, sir. We could maybe take out one of their ships before they destroy us, but it would not help the civilians. Taemin spoke up from where he sat at a secondary station. Captain, I have an idea. Villani technology is far more advanced than Kryn weapons. If we could disable their targeting systems temporarily, create a window of confusion, you could evacuate the civilians while they are blind. Can you do that? I do not know. I have never used our technology for warfare before. No Villani has in 12,000 years, but I understand the principles. Give me 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt like years. Below them, another transmission came from Jiwon. The Kryn were becoming impatient. They had begun executing hostages, one every hour, until the colony's elders agreed to their demands. We have no time, Daehyun said. I am ready, Taemin replied. His hands shook as they hovered over the controls. Captain, once I do this, once I use Villani technology as a weapon, even a non-lethal one, I can never go back. My people will see me as fallen, as one who abandoned the quiet path. Then don't do it. I will find another way. Taemin shook his head. No, this is my choice, my people, my responsibility. He activated the system. The effect was immediate and spectacular. Every Kryn ship suddenly went dark, their systems overwhelmed by a pulse of energy that fried their targeting computers and sensor arrays. They were not destroyed, not hurt, but they were blind and helpless. Now, Daehyun ordered. Get everyone out. The Horizon's Edge descended into the colony. Transport shuttles launched in rapid succession. Ensign Hyunwoo, one of the youngest crew members, led evacuation teams on the ground. Jiwon and her students were among the first rescued. The Kryn recovered faster than expected. Their backup systems came online, and they began firing blindly at the colony. One shot struck near an evacuation point where 300 civilians were waiting for the last transport. Hyunwoo made a choice. He diverted his shuttle to draw fire away from the civilians. It worked. The Kryn ships focused on him, and the last transport escaped. Hyunwoo's shuttle did not. They recovered 3,000 Vellani civilians. They brought them to safety, and they left behind one young human officer who had given everything so that strangers might live. As the Horizon's Edge jumped back to assembly space, Taemin wept openly. He died for my people. He had no obligation to us. He could have escaped. Why did he stay? Ji-won, holding one of her terrified students, answered quietly. Because that is what it means to stand with humanity. They understand that some lives are worth more than your own. When they arrived back at the Ring of Accord, they expected immediate arrest. Instead, they found Elder Mirai waiting. Tears ran down her face as she watched 3,000 saved Vellani civilians disembark. The Assembly has formally censured humanity, she said quietly. Motions for expulsion are being prepared. But Captain, know this. You saved my people when we could not save ourselves. You showed us that the quiet path may be incomplete. For that, I will be forever grateful, even if I must resign my position in protest. And resign she did, that very day, shocking the entire galaxy. The elder who had led the Vellani for decades walked away from power because her government had chosen protocol over lives. The attack came without warning, simultaneous strikes on 5 assembly worlds. The Kryn Dominion had clearly grown tired of testing boundaries. This was not another raid or border incident. This was full-scale invasion. Commander Taemin stood on the bridge of the Guardian's Promise, the first Vellani vessel ever designed for defense. Around him, his crew worked with practiced efficiency, every one of them a volunteer who had trained under the Shield Accord. They had prepared for this moment for months. Now it was here. Captain Dae-hyun, status on human forces. Taemin spoke calmly into the communications array. Dae-hyun's face appeared on screen from the bridge of the Horizon's Edge. We have 12 ships in the sector. The Kryn have 40. We are outnumbered but not outmatched. The question is whether we can hold long enough for evacuations. One of the targeted worlds was New Hope, a colony of mixed species that had joined the Shield Accord just weeks earlier. 2,000 civilians were on that world, and Kryn ground forces were already landing. The traditional assembly had sent negotiators. The Kryn had destroyed their shuttle before it even entered orbit. All Shield Accord forces, this is Admiral Soo-jin. Our mission is clear. Protect the civilians. Get them out. Hold the line until every last person is safe. The galaxy is watching. Show them what it means to be Guardians. The Guardians' Promise jumped to New Hope alongside a flotilla of human and Vellani ships. As they emerged from faster-than-light travel, the scale of the Kryn assault became apparent. Warships surrounded the planet, and the surface was already burning in places where they had bombarded defensive positions. They are targeting civilian centers, one of Taemin's officers reported, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. Not military targets, civilian centers. Taemin felt something he had never experienced before. It took him a moment to recognize it as hatred pure and burning. The Kryn were not warriors seeking victory. They were murderers seeking victims. The distinction mattered. Weapons status, he said quietly. All defensive systems online, Commander. But we have also armed the countermeasure arrays. If we need to strike back, we can. Taemin had sworn he would never give that order. The Vellani did not attack. It was against everything the quiet path represented. But as he watched Kryn ships fire on evacuation transports, as he saw civilians dying, the oath felt hollow. Defensive positions, he ordered. Put us between them and those transports. If they want to hurt those people, they will have to go through us first. The Guardian's Promise moved into position, its shields flaring as Kryn weapons struck. The ship rocked but held. Behind them, transports continued loading refugees. On the ground, Captain Dae-hyun led a mixed force of human and Vellani soldiers. Ji-won was with them, having refused to remain safe while others fought for her adopted home. She carried medical supplies, not weapons, but she was there. Kryn forces 200 meters and closing, a human sergeant reported. They have armor support. We are not going to hold them long. Dae-hyun studied the tactical display. The evacuation point was in a valley with high ridges on either side. Basic defensive terrain. He had maybe 200 fighters against a Kryn force 3 times that size. Everyone to the ridges, he ordered. High ground, overlapping fields of fire, make them pay for every meter. We need 30 minutes for the last transports. What followed was brutal. The Kryn advanced with contempt, expecting easy victory against species that had never fought before. They learned quickly that these were not the helpless victims of Serenity's haven. These were guardians who had trained, who had prepared, who knew exactly what they were defending. Volani technology proved devastating when turned to defense. Energy shields that could surround entire squads, making them nearly invulnerable while they covered evacuation routes. Precision stun weapons that could disable attackers without killing them. Medical technology that could save soldiers who would have died with human medicine alone. And the human soldiers brought something the Volani lacked: experience. They knew how to fight from terrain. They knew how to make an enemy advance costly. They knew how to buy time with blood when time was all that mattered. Taemin watched from orbit as the battle unfolded. His ship was taking heavy fire, shields dropping to dangerous levels. 4 Kryn warships were concentrating on the Guardian's promise, trying to break through to the transports behind. "Commander, shields at 20%. His tactical officer reported. "We cannot sustain this much longer." "How many transports are still loading?" 3, another 15 minutes, 15 minutes. An eternity in combat. Taemin looked at the weapons array display. The countermeasures were ready. 1 strike could cripple the nearest Kryn ship, give them breathing room. But it would mean crossing a line. It would mean the Volani had become warriors, not just guardians. Then he saw a Kryn missile streak toward a transport packed with civilian refugees. It would hit in seconds. Hundreds would die. Taemin made his choice. "Fire," he said quietly. The Guardian's promises weapons discharged, a precisely targeted pulse that struck the Kryn ship's missile systems. The warhead exploded harmlessly in space, far from its intended target. But the Kryn ship was crippled, drifting powerless. "Commander," his weapons officer said, her voice awed. "We just fired on another vessel." "We attacked." "No," Taemin corrected gently. "We defended." There is a difference, and that difference is everything. The battle for New Hope lasted 6 hours. By the end, every civilian was evacuated. Daehyun's ground forces had held their position at terrible cost. 12 human soldiers died. 8 Volani Guardians fell. But 2,000 civilians lived. As the last transport cleared the planet's atmosphere, Ji-won transmitted a message that would be heard across the galaxy. She stood in the transport bay, surrounded by refugees, her medical jacket stained with blood from the wounded she had treated. "I am Ji-won of Serenity's Haven," she began. "Months ago the Kryn destroyed my home because we would not fight back. Today I watched the Volani stand and fight. I watched humans and Volani die together so that strangers might live. And I want the galaxy to understand something important." She paused, making sure every word was clear. "The Volani did not abandon peace today. We did not become warriors. We became something the galaxy has never seen before. We became guardians of peace, protectors of the innocent, defenders of everything the quiet path represents. We weep for our enemies who fell, even as we stand against them. We take no joy in violence even as we accept its necessity. This is not a new path. It is the completion of the old one." The message spread across every assembly world. Species that had condemned the Shield Accord watched the battle footage and saw something that challenged their assumptions. The Volani had fought with restraint, with precision, with obvious reluctance. They had used the minimum force necessary. They had offered surrender terms even in the midst of battle. They had mourned their enemies even while defending against them. High Marshal Quan of the Kryn Dominion watched from his flagship with growing concern. He had expected easy victories. He had expected peaceful species to collapse at the first sign of real violence. Instead, he had seen coordination, discipline, and most troubling of all, effectiveness. The humans had taught the Volani how to fight. But the Volani had taught the humans how to fight with their souls intact. Together, they had created something dangerous to an empire built on intimidation. Over the following weeks, the pattern repeated on other worlds. The Kryn would attack, Shield Accord forces would respond, civilians would be evacuated, and each time, the galaxy watched as peaceful species stood their ground, not because they loved war, but because they loved their people too much to abandon them. Elder Mirai, though no longer officially part of the government, addressed the full assembly from the floor as a private citizen. The chamber was packed, every species represented, even the Kryn. "For 12,000 years, the Volani followed the quiet path," she said. "We believed that peace required only the absence of violence. We were wrong. Peace requires the presence of justice, the courage to stand for the innocent and the strength to defend what is right. The Shield Accord does not abandon peace, it perfects it. The vote on humanity's expulsion finally came, but now 8 species stood with humanity, threatening to leave the assembly if the vote passed. 12 more abstained, unable to condemn actions that had saved thousands of lives. The motion failed. Instead, a new proposal passed, the Assembly Reform Act. It acknowledged that peaceful species needed the capacity to defend themselves. It created protocols for rapid response to humanitarian crises. It admitted that 12,000 years of diplomacy had been built on the fortunate absence of species like the Kryn, not on any inherent strength of the assembly itself. High Marshal Quan left the assembly in protest, taking the Kryn dominion with him. He vowed that this was not over, that the Kryn would return stronger than ever. But as his ships jumped away, he knew the truth. The galaxy had changed. The peaceful species were no longer helpless. And an empire built on intimidating the weak had just lost its greatest advantage. Taemin stood with Dae Hyun on the observation deck of the Ring of Accord, watching ships from a dozen species training together in the distance. Human vessels flew alongside Vellani ships, teaching and learning from each other. The galaxy watched and wondered what would happen next. The news feeds across the galaxy exploded with the story. For the first time in 12,000 years, a Vellani had used their technology for warfare. For the first time in recorded history, an elder had resigned in protest of assembly inaction. And for the first time since joining, humanity faced expulsion from the Galactic Assembly. But something unexpected happened. The 3,000 refugees from Serenity's Haven began to speak. Jiwon stood before the Vellani Grand Council on their homeworld of Harmony. The chamber was packed with citizens who had come to hear her testimony. Her hand still shook when she spoke, but her voice was clear and strong. "I watched the Kryn destroy our library," she said. 3,000 years of poetry, philosophy, and art, burned because they found our pacifism amusing. They laughed as they fired on buildings full of history. They mocked us as they took hostages, and when we begged for mercy, they told us that mercy was for those who could defend themselves. The council chamber was silent. Jiwon continued. The assembly sent negotiators. The Kryn executed 5 of us while those negotiators were still in transit. They would have killed more. They would have killed all of us eventually, once they had extracted everything useful from our colony, and the assembly would have negotiated until we were all dead, because that is the quiet path. Endure until there is nothing left to endure. An elderly council member stood. But violence begets violence, child. If we abandon the quiet path, we become what we despise. We lose what makes us Vellani. Jiwon's eyes flashed. Elder, with respect, I lost what made me Vellani when Kryn weapons destroyed my home. I lost it when they murdered my friends. The quiet path did not save us. A human captain and a brave Vellani named Taemin saved us by doing what the quiet path forbids. They stood and fought, and because of that, 3,000 of us live. Another refugee stood, then another. One by one, they shared their stories. The galaxy listened. Every word was broadcast across assembly space. Species that had never questioned the quiet path began to wonder. On Earth, Admiral Sujin received an unexpected message. It was from Elder Mirai, now a private citizen but still carrying immense influence among the Vellani people. Admiral, I wish to discuss a proposal. I believe it is time the Vellani learn to defend themselves. We need teachers. We need those who understand what it means to be guardians rather than warriors. Would humanity be willing to help us? Sujin brought the proposal to Earth's government. The response was immediate and unanimous. Yes, humanity would help. But the situation was complicated. The assembly was in chaos. Humanity's actions had split the member species into factions. Some supported the rescue mission and called for assembly reform. Others demanded humanity's immediate expulsion for bringing violence into their peaceful space. The debate raged for weeks. Meanwhile, on Harmony, something unprecedented began. Young Vellani started volunteering to learn defensive tactics, thousands at first, then tens of thousands. They were not seeking to become warriors. They wanted to become guardians, protectors of the quiet path rather than passive adherents to it. Taemin became their symbol, though he had not sought that role. He had returned to Harmony expecting exile, but instead found himself celebrated by the youth and condemned by traditionalists. He stood at a crossroads of Villani culture, representing change that terrified the old generation and inspired the young. One evening, as he met with a group of volunteers, someone brought up ancient texts. The architect wrote about this, a young Villani named Bora said. Centuries ago, before the Quiet Path was formalized, his writings were deemed too controversial and were buried in archives. What did he write? Taman asked. That peace without strength is just waiting for violence. That the Quiet Path was never meant to be complete on its own. That it was the first half of a philosophy and someday we would need to discover the second half. They found the architect's writings buried deep in historical databases. He had predicted this moment, this crisis, this choice. The old philosopher had known that the Quiet Path would someday face a test it could not pass through passivity alone. His words spread like fire across Harmony and beyond. Young Villani debated them in forums and gatherings. The old generation tried to suppress them as dangerous. The split in Villani society deepened. Elder Mirai called a gathering at a neutral location, a beautiful garden that had stood for 3,000 years. Representatives from both sides of the debate attended. So did Ambassador Hana and Admiral Sujin, invited as observers and advisors. We stand at a moment of choice, Mirai began. We can cling to the Quiet Path as we have always known it, pure and unchanged. Or we can acknowledge that the galaxy has shown us our philosophy's limits. This is not a choice between peace and war. It is a choice between peace protected and peace vulnerable. A traditional elder stood. If we train our people to fight even in defense, we corrupt what makes us Villani. We become like the humans, like the Kryn, like every species that has chosen violence. Admiral Sujin asked for permission to speak. When granted, she stood and faced the assembly. Honored elders, you fear becoming like us. I understand that fear. Humanity's history is stained with blood. We have committed horrors we can never undo, but we have also learned something precious from that pain. We learned that violence without purpose is evil, but violence in defense of the innocent is noble. We learned that strength can be gentle, that power can be merciful, and that the strongest warriors are those who fight not because they love violence but because they love peace too much to see it destroyed. She gestured to where Jiwan sat among the refugees. Your people suffered because you had no strength to stand with your principles. The Kryn did not respect your peace. They exploited it. If the Villani learn to defend themselves, you will not become like humanity or the Kryn. You will become something the galaxy has never seen before. A people who choose peace from strength rather than peace from helplessness. The debate continued for hours. In the end, a compromise emerged. Those Villani who wished to learn defense would be permitted to do so. It would be voluntary, never mandatory. They would train not as soldiers but as guardians. And the program would be called the Shield Accord, reflecting its defensive nature. Human instructors began arriving on Harmony within weeks. They were carefully selected. Veterans who understood restraint, who had seen combat and hated it, who could teach not just tactics, but the weight of violence. Sujin led the program personally. The training was unlike any military program in human history. It focused on protection, evacuation, defensive positions. Offensive tactics were taught only as a last resort. The Villani proved to be quick learners, their advanced technology complementing human tactical knowledge. But the Shield Accord was more than a training program. It became a political movement. Mirai and Hana worked together to formalize it as a mutual defense pact. Any species that wished to maintain the Assembly's peaceful principles while acknowledging the need for defense could join. The response stunned everyone. 8 species signed the Shield Accord in the first month, quietly and without public announcement. They were species that had watched Serenity's haven and realized they were just as vulnerable. They wanted peace but no longer trusted that peace alone would save them. The traditional assembly, meanwhile, finally moved forward with humanity's expulsion. The vote was scheduled and the outcome seemed certain. Humanity would be cast out, made an example of, shown that violence had no place in civilized space. Then the Kryn struck again. This time they hit 3 colonies simultaneously, all belonging to different peaceful species. They were not seeking territory or resources. They were proving a point. The Assembly's peace was an illusion maintained only by the Kryn's tolerance. The attacks were devastating. Thousands died, and the Assembly's response was the same as before. Send negotiators, pursue dialogue, trust in the process. But now, the refugees from these new attacks began arriving at Shield Accord stations. They told stories identical to what the Villani of Serenity's Haven had experienced. Contempt, cruelty. The Kryn's absolute certainty that peaceful species were prey, not neighbors. Public opinion shifted rapidly. Species that had condemned humanity's actions began to question whether the old ways were sufficient. The vote on humanity's expulsion was postponed, then postponed again. In a private meeting, Elder Mirai told Ambassador Hana what was really happening. The assembly is fracturing. Those who cling to the old ways see the Shield Accord as betrayal. Those who support it see the traditional assembly as enabling violence through inaction. I fear we are heading toward a split with half the galaxy on each side. What can we do? Hana asked. Show them that the Shield Accord is not about war. Show them that strength and peace can coexist. Show them that standing with humanity does not mean becoming human. It means becoming strong enough to protect what makes us who we are. Tae-min, who was also present, spoke up. The Kryn will attack again. They are testing us, seeing how far they can push before meeting real resistance. When they attack next, the galaxy will be watching. If the Shield Accord proves itself, if we show that defense does not require abandoning peace, we may yet save the assembly from tearing itself apart. They were right. The Kryn would